All right, let's talk about two of the trickiest and honestly most important parts of any research paper: the results and the discussion sections. We're going to break down how you can take that mountain of data you've collected and turn it into a story that actually makes sense.
We have all been there, right? You're just staring at that blinking cursor on a blank page and you have no idea how to start. It's so easy to feel completely overwhelmed. But here's the good news. There's a clear path forward, a structure you can follow. And that's exactly what we're going to walk through today.
So first things first, the results section. I want you to think of this as the what of your paper. This is where you just lay out your findings, plain and simple. This is not the place for your opinions or interpretations. It is purely the facts that your research uncovered. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds kind of dry, but it's actually fantastic news for you as a writer. Why? Because it means this section is predictable, is probably the most straightforward part of the entire paper to write, because you're not creating anything new, you're simply reporting what you found. You're basically a journalist for your own data. And really, that structure just boils down to two main parts. First, you talk about who you studied. Those are your demographics. And second, you present what you actually found. Those are your findings. Let's dig into that first piece. So, what exactly are demographics? Well, think of them as the vital statistics for the group of people you studied. You're basically painting a picture for your reader. Who were these people? How many were there? What was the breakdown of age, gender, income, all of that good stuff? This sets the stage for everything else you're about to say. And listen, it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. For the love of all that is good, don't make your reader do the math. Instead of just throwing out raw numbers like on the left, use percentages like you see on the right. That better description instantly tells a story. Wow, this was a heavily female sample. It's just clearer, it's faster, and it puts everything into context right away. So you might be thinking, okay, but my study is about, I don't know, a new chemical reaction. It's not about gender or income. Why do I need to spend so much time on this? It's a fair question. And the answer is, demographics can often be the hidden reason behind your results. And this is a perfect example of why. There was this one study that made a pretty big claim that a parent's race was linked to how often they read to their kid. But here's the catch. The researchers never asked about the parents' education or their income. And we already know from tons of other research that parents with higher education and income tend to read more to their kids. So by leaving out those key demographics, the study's conclusion wasn't just shaky, it was totally misleading. Okay, so once you've set the stage with who you studied, it's time to get into your core findings. Now, how you present this stuff depends entirely on whether your research was quantitative or qualitative. So let's talk about the how. On one hand, you've got quantitative research. This is all about numbers. You start out with a theory, a hypothesis, and you use statistics to find out, hey, was I right? Qualitative research, on the other hand, is more exploratory. You're digging through things like interviews or observations, looking for patterns and themes, and really asking, what's the story here? And when you're in that quantitative world of numbers and stats, your main mission is to go head-to-head with something called the null hypothesis. This is a really fundamental idea in statistical testing. So what is it? Well, think of the null hypothesis as the world's biggest skeptic. It's the default position that says, nope, there's absolutely no connection, no relationship between the things you're studying. Your entire job as a researcher is to gather enough evidence to stand up to that skeptic and say, actually, you're wrong. That's what we mean when we say we reject the null. But, and this is where it gets really cool, rejecting the null doesn't automatically mean your original idea was right. Take this study on alcohol laws. The researchers' theory was that stricter laws would lead to less alcoholism. The null hypothesis, of course, was that there's no relationship. Well, they found a relationship, so they rejected the null. But get this, it was the opposite of what they predicted. Countries with more lenient laws actually had fewer alcohol-related problems. And that's the kicker, right? Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when you prove both the default assumption and your own theory wrong. All right, now let's flip over to qualitative studies. These are coming from a totally different angle. Here, you're not trying to prove or disprove a rigid hypothesis. Instead, you're more like a detective, sifting through all the clues, the words, the stories, to uncover themes and build a narrative from scratch. Just look at this example from a study on how parents view ADHD. The researchers didn't just find one single opinion, they found this whole spectrum of views. You can see how using direct quotes really brings the data to life. You have some parents seeing it as a real illness, others as a discipline problem, and some just think it's normal kid behavior. That's the kind of richness and nuance that qualitative data gives you.
So, you did it. You've described your participants, you've presented your findings, whether they were numbers or narratives, you've reported the what. The reader has all the puzzle pieces in front of them. But so what? What does it all actually mean? And that question, that is the perfect lead-in to the discussion section. If the results section was the what, then the discussion is the so what. This is your chance to finally step in, interpret your findings, and explain to everyone why they should care.
A really solid discussion has 3 key moves. You start with your interpretation. How do your findings fit into the bigger conversation happening in your field? Then you've got to be honest about your study's limitations. Every study has them, and being upfront about them just makes you more credible. And finally, you give recommendations. Based on what you learned, where should other researchers go from here? This is really your moment to shine as the expert. You've laid out all the evidence in the results section. Now you get to be the guide. You connect the dots for the reader, you link your specific study back to the big picture, and you make the case for why this new piece of the puzzle you've uncovered is so important. Okay, let's wrap this all up. We've journeyed from the raw what of your data all the way to the so what of its meaning. If you remember one thing from this, let it be this. You are not just a reporter of facts. You are a storyteller. You start with the characters, your demographics, you introduce the plot points, your findings, and then in the discussion, you finally reveal the theme, the meaning of it all. It's a journey, a narrative that you're building. So, the next time you're facing that empty page, don't see it as a chore. See it as an opportunity. Hidden inside all those numbers and notes is a story. It has characters, maybe some plot twists, and a real meaning. And your job is to be the one to tell it,